So I've decided I'm going to try and get this done before Christmas. I probably should brush my hair. Oh well, it is what it is. We're on chapter 7, so here I go. Where should I put the burnt ones? Gav stood with his hands on his hips, surveying the mess. Alicia had asked a good question. There was quite a lot of burnt pages. Try to keep the piles together. If we sort out the burnt ones, I'll never get them back in the right order. But if a stack seems mostly fine, put it in this corner. The ones that are damaged enough that the parts are unreadable, go over there. How much knowledge had been destroyed with his bumbling. It was enough to make him want to give up and go be a farmer, except he looked out on the fields full of farmers each morning, and realistically, he did not want that at all. Farming looked like miserable work. And all that getting up at dawn and carrying heavy things and getting slobbered on by big smelly animals and being covered in shit for a far higher percentage of the day than he currently spent covered in shit. He imagined that had something to do with why he had become a dark wizard in the first place. Alicia had been queasy looking when he went to see if she still wanted to learn magic after such a night. But when he had asked, she had raised her chin defiantly. She wouldn't be certain why he'd kept the offer, he knew, but from what he had learned about her so far, she was surely hoping to find a way to stop him anyway. She didn't know, because he himself wasn't entirely certain, why he had repeated the offer, except perhaps the vague hope that she would succeed. This was either a massive act of self-preservation or self-destruction, and he wasn't sure how he'd know which until after the fact. He had offered her some plainer clothes, ones with a high neckline that hid the collar, which she had quickly accepted. She had been less enthusiastic about taking off the ring, but he had pointed out that he couldn't just let the rest of the staff know that he was out, or that she was out of her cell. I apologize for all of the hesitant, reading. I'm doing the best I can. So here I keep going. I have this thought that the more I do it, the more fluent I will sound. So we'll see when we put these all together if I get better over time. But it has been a while since I've done this consistently, so practice makes progress, right? All right, back to this. He pointed out that he couldn't just let the rest of the staff know that she was out of her cell. She had looked dubious until he'd mentioned Serico, and then she had yanked it off her finger and into her pocket. The goblins had accepted the mysterious new apprentice he had dragged out of nowhere, without question at least. "My lord wants more squids?" Garabeetle asked helpfully. He had gotten word of the cleaning project and immediately volunteered, even using words Gav could make out. The lad looked so hopeful that Gav hadn't had the heart to turn him down. Now he kind of wished he had. Garavax had never had these problems, he was sure. No more squids, he said hastily. I have quite enough squid at the moment for my purposes. What purpose he could possibly have for a squid, he had no idea. The bag had wriggled itself off the desk and inched into a corner twice before he had jammed it into a wooden chest. Now the chest quivered occasionally. Garabeetle, I need you to scrub all the chalk off the floor, he added before the young goblin could come up with another helpful suggestion. All of it, mind you. Do not leave a single mark. Do you hear? Garabeetle nodded with his ever-present enthusiasm. Gav wondered if there existed a chore sufficiently menial and disgusting that Garabeetle would balk. At that age, maybe not. Getting the remains of the symbols off the floor would be a relief. He had the notes if he ever needed to reference it, but he wanted no chance at all of anything summoning Estogath or its kin ever again. Certainly not by accident. Alicia had already started to make a dent in the sea of cinders and paper, which meant that Gav really did need to tackle the harder things. I left a mess. And the dog has to lay on it now because I didn't clean up the couch. And he wants to lay on it. Oh well. The desk and the workbench looked exactly like the truth, that a small battle had taken place over them. He started a list of what would need to be replaced. Half of the glassware. He didn't even know where to get those, but he doubted it would be cheap. The roses would need to be replaced. Oh, interesting. When he thought about it, he knew that any dried flower would do. He didn't know much about roses. They were a summer flower, weren't they? But surely something still bloomed. Maybe he could send an order down to the mayor. Someone in the town surely knew where to find some flowers. Little girls were supposed to pick them all the time, weren't they? Maybe little girls had something to hide. He thought of small girls armed with fireballs and wondered if it would make for a safer or a more terrifying world. The biggest candle had tipped over. It had extinguished itself in the process, thankfully, but the liquid wax had puddled around a number of smaller objects on the desk. The candle stub had merged with the larger pool. Hopefully that would not prove problematic. It might be a candle that kept a spell going, making him invisible or calming angry spirits or wearing down his enemy's life force as long as it burned. Or it might be the stub of a regular candle that he had meant to dispose of and was too big a slob to remove from the desk. Too late now. The smaller bits, the fumets, the mouse skull, the little key, the button, the teeth, were now suspended in solid wax. He considered them for a moment. Some would be easy enough to melt out. Some could be chipped, which would take longer. He didn't know if the fumets could be freed at all without falling apart, and he didn't particularly want to experiment. Well, he didn't need any of it at the moment. He chipped it all off the desk and dumped the entire lump into another chest, which he stacked on top of the squid chest. Anything to keep it from thumping its way away from the wall. "Let's see how far you've gotten," he said to Alicia. She tipped her chin out, daring him to criticize her. "I started just putting them in piles, like you said." But he raised an eyebrow, looking at the table overflowing with what was clearly a significantly more elaborate organizational scheme than he had specified. She paused when no criticism was forthcoming. He wondered how often she had been criticized at home. But some of them were out of order, and it seemed better to try to group them together. Interesting. He cocked his head to the side. "How could you tell which went with which?" "Well, the handwriting, for one. This is the only one with all this loopy writing, all 3 pages of it. They clearly go together." She held up a set. Gav picked up another, studiously casual. "And this one?" She swallowed. I don't know. They feel like they belong together." "Never mind," she said, starting to shuffle the piles back into one. No, you're right." Gav considered her. "You have a certain instinct for magic, it seems." "Really?" The word popped out. "Really," he said. She smiled, perhaps the first genuine smile he'd seen on her face. It was a nice smile, less elegant and more puckish than he'd expected. He was looking forward to teaching someone, he realized with surprise. It would almost be like starting over in some ways. Beneath its cover, the mirror flickered. "Oh, no," he groaned. "Not Zarakonar again." "Who's Zarakonar?" Alicia asked. He had gotten used to privacy in his workshop. Another slip. He scrambled for the mirror. If you put wizards on a scale of rides unicorns and chats with angels to eats living children for breakfast, Zarakonar is so much farther down on the scale than I am that he probably keeps an orphanage with a saltwater pool so they come pre-brined. Stay out of sight. Oh, and keep Garabeetle with you. Gav rather wished that he could join them. But when he got to the mirror and started to remove the cover, he realized the little glowy bits at the bottom were different. He had been working them out. Not Zarakonar and not Valavina. Did that leave Zaxus? With a sense of foreboding and preemptive regret, he tugged off the cover and sat down. At least he knew better how to control when the connection established itself now. That didn't mean he was prepared, though. How are we doing on time? It's 10 minutes. Let's find out who he sees next time. Nope, that wasn't it.